Greetings, America. I'm Barbara Jones Clark, Chair of the Coretta Scott King Book Awards Archives and History Committee of the American Library Association. And welcome to our ongoing oral history project, an oral history conversational interview, September 26, 2020, with Carolyn Garnes, Coretta Scott King Book Awards Chair from 1993 to 1997. Let me have Crystal Carr-Jeter, my dear friend, colleague, and co-interviewer, introduce herself, and we'll get started.
Hello, all. I'm Crystal Carr-Jeter. I currently work as the Children's Library Associate at the Willoughby Eastlake Public Library in Willoughby Hills, Ohio. For more than 45 years, I have been serving on the Coretta Scott King Book Award Committee. I served as the executive chair of Coretta Scott King Book Award Committee and am currently the immediate past chair of the Archives and History Committee. I helped to establish the Coretta Scott King Oral History Project. Interviewing the first honoree, Dr. Henrietta Smith. She was the author and editor of the first edition of the Coretta Scott King Awards book, From Vision to Reality. But one of the highlights of my career is participating in this particular oral history project in honoring Carolyn Garnes. Barbara?
Just a few words about our interviewee. I've known Carolyn Garnes for over 30 years. When I first started in ALA as a young librarian in the 1980s, Carolyn was already working with what was then the CSK Task Force. If I had to describe her with one word, I would say treasure. That is what Carolyn is to the CSK community, our treasure. Her commitment to promoting African American children's literature is unsurpassed, and her allegiance is reflected in a long and storied career, and is even emboldened by her love for and her work with the CSK endeavors. Carolyn.
Barbara, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I am pleased and humbled that the CSK Archives and History Committee is giving me the opportunity to tell my story.
Carolyn, you served in several capacities with the Coretta Scott King Award Committee. You've been chair of the CSK Task Force, chair of the marketing committee for CSK's 50th anniversary, and our CSK unofficial liaison to Atlanta, and a jury member. Tell us about your CSK work and how it influenced your advocacy for African American children's literature.
It has been my esteemed pleasure to work with the Coretta Scott King Book Award Committee for over 35 years. The CSK Book Awards serves as a platform for the advocacy of African American books for children and young adults. I have seen firsthand how this award has affected the careers of many authors and illustrators. And it has provided an opportunity to bring African American children's literature out of the shadows and into schools and libraries all over the country. This is a picture at the 1997 CSK Award breakfast that I presided over.
Carolyn, we'd like to also know how you became a librarian. Would you please share just a few highlights of your professional career with us?
I became a librarian by happenstance. When I was 13 years old, I lost some library books. And the librarian decided to punish my whole extended family. My daddy has about 7 or 8 sisters and brothers, so I have about 25 first cousins that live in the community with me. My dad went down and told the librarian that he couldn't afford to pay for the books, but he offered my services, that I could share books or do whatever she needed for me to do. And the librarian said no. So my elementary school did not have a library. So our little public library was doing segregation. So our little public library was the only place I could go to get books. So I did not, I was not able to get any books until I went to high school. We did have a library in my high school. And the first time I went back to the public library was when I was a senior in college working on a Shakespeare paper. As far as my career is concerned, I've only worked one place during my career, but let me back up a little and tell you how I came to librarianship. Okay. I was at Alcorn State University preparing to be an English teacher. And in the fall of my senior year, I decided that maybe that wasn't what I wanted to do. So when I went home for the Christmas holidays, I called my favorite English teacher to get her advice about what direction I could take my career. And so she told me she had just completed her credentials to be a school librarian. So after I hung up from her, I say librarian. But guess what? When I got back to campus in January, I ran to the counseling center. And I said, hey, do you guys have any fellowships on librarianship? And the counselor said, you know, we just got something in from the University of Illinois. I was on my way to practice teaching. And I said, when is the deadline? And she said, I'll give you everything, take it with you to your practice teaching and fill it out before the deadline. And wow. I did. Wow. And I was accepted in the University of Illinois Carnegie Fellows Program. Yeah. This was a program that for the first time, more than 2 or 3 African Americans were in the university library school. I was in the first class, that was 10 of us. And then we were joined later by 11 more. So 21 African American students was in the library school at one time. Some of my classmates include Sam Morrison, Sybil Moses, also Bobby Player and Edith Fisher, who were both BCALA presidents. It was really during library school that my interest in African American books for children started, because many of my papers I did on African American publishing of children's books. And one of the books I used was We Build Together by the renowned Charlemagne Rollins. I also saw in my research that both Effie Lee Morris and Augusta Baker were members of that selection committee. And I thought that was when I first fell in love with African American books for children. I've only worked one place my entire 31-year career. Most of my career, I was a branch manager. And this is the first branch I managed, and it was in the heart of the inner city of Atlanta. I'm helping a little boy get his library card. This is a picture at the West Hunter branch, and I'll tell you, it was a historical Black branch in the community. The West Hunter Library was very historical because it was the only branch at one time African Americans could use. I wanted to do something special. And I had an opportunity to write a grant to the Friends of the Library. And I won the grant. I won $5,000 to build an African American children's collection. Some of the titles that were in my collection was one of my favorite books, Just Us Women by Jeanette Keynes, illustrated by Pat Cummins. John Steptoe's books, Stevie, Train Ride, and Uptown, and also Lucille Clifton's Everett Anderson's books. The next picture is of the East Point Library. The East Point Library was the only library in Fulton County that was not a part of the Atlanta Fulton Public Library. And I was challenged to bring that library into our system. And this is me at the East Point Library with students. This is a newspaper article they did just before the opening of the East Point Library, telling about my career, and that at that particular time I had opened over 8 branches. And this is the opening of the new East Point branch. And that gentleman you kind of see in the middle is our county commissioner, who insisted that East Point have a brand new library. He gave me $500,000 for an opening day collection.
Well, referring to Atlanta, in the Atlanta group, those were people who were living and working in Atlanta, and they had a special bond, I think, with the award. So many people from the early years served on various committees and worked to make CSK Award successful. I know you cut your teeth in the library world with this group. Tell us a little bit about what that commitment was for Atlantans and how it affected Coretta Scott King.
If Atlanta was the Mecca for African Americans, then the Atlanta Fulton Public Library was the Mecca for African American librarians. I think it was more African American librarians employed by the Atlanta Fulton Public Library than any library I knew of. We were very close-knit, and we supported each other. When David and I took leadership in Coretta Scott King, our colleagues came along and helped us out as well. But Crystal, before I go on, I did not tell you about what I feel is my most successful thing I did on my job. I was able to bring library service to the unserved. This is an article that appeared in the Atlanta magazine calling me a hero for bringing library service to the children of public housing. We had 5 mini libraries in public housing. We had a bookmobile. We had a senior stop where we took books to senior complexes and books on tape. We also had a story caravan where we had 2 story ladies who went to Title I daycare centers, introducing books to preschoolers for the first time.
Right.
I just want to mention some of the ladies who were part of that group. Brenda Hunter, Nancy Woodson, Jacqueline Sykes, and Joyce Mills, who was the wife of Lev Mills.
Now, Carolyn, David Searcy preceded Henrietta Smith as chair of the CSK task force at the time. I remember him so vividly because he was the first chair that I actually worked closely with when I became involved with the ALA in those early years of my service. And his death came early in his career. And I know that he worked with Effie Morris when she was chair, but you were closer to him because of the Atlanta connection. Tell us about David and his contributions to the CSK Award.
Oh, David, my dear beloved friend David. He was my colleague, he was my buddy. He spent many hours at my kitchen table eating and trying to get the recipes from my mother. He served as chair from 1984 to 1989. He did work closely with Effie Morris. And you know, I really believe that Effie was training David to be her successor.
I believe that too.
And he was, of course, her successor. One of the things I like to say too is David opened up the Coretta Scott King Award from that core little group. He kind of opened it up and more people became involved. And he also presided over the 20th anniversary where he brought Dr. Bernice King in as our guest speaker.
A review of the award history shows that one of the major founders of the Coretta Scott King Award was Mrs. Glyndon Greer. who both admired and had a friendship with Mrs. King too. Tell us about her as a person and how she helped to shape this ward.
Well, most people do not know Mrs. Greer lived in Atlanta from 1972 to 1979. And of course, we know she was the backbone of the Coretta Scott King Award. She brought it to Atlanta. I saw her several times, but I really didn't know her. But when she came to Atlanta, first she went to the King Center where Mamie Clayton, the archivist, helped her oversee the award. Then she went to the Atlanta University Center where Dr. Virginia Lacey Jones, Joyce Mills, and her staff helped with the award. It was actually Virginia Lacey Jones that asked Lev Mills to design a seal for the award. And he did. He did it pro bono. And the only thing that he asked was that his name always appear on the seal.
Carolyn, in addition, there were other trailblazers like Mable McKissick, Ella Yates, Effie Morris, Henrietta Smith, and perhaps others. Can you share with us your interface with them and their contributions to CSK in the infancy of this award?
I attended many ALAs that Mable McKissick attended. She told us many stories. We always made it a point to have lunch or dinner with her at the ALA. In fact, at one year, we honored her at the breakfast. She told me many stories about the award. Of course, she was, along with Glyndon Greer, were the two librarians who actually started the award. Effie Morris was chair of the award when I first became involved. And I was in awe of her leadership. She was a no-nonsense woman, and she got the job done.
Yeah.
When I was sitting in the breakfast at the 2009 Coretta Scott King Awards, the ALA president at that time, who was Jim Redding, stated that ALA chose Effie Morris to be the one to lead the Coretta Scott King Award until ALA. She was the first chair of the award at the time we became official to ALA. Ella Yates was my mentor. She was my immediate supervisor for many, many years. And she taught us, those of us who were in the inner city, she taught us that the work we did was good, important work. And she always held us up in meetings about the work we were doing, because when we were in the inner city, we were really introducing the library to our citizens, because the library had not been a part of their lives. And so it was an honor to, I think everybody needs a mentor. Everybody needs somebody they can look up to. And Ella Yates was that for me. And I'll just tell you a funny story about her. When she was library director, or when she was branch service administrator, she dressed better than anybody I ever knew. But when she would come to meetings, she would come from the rear of the room to the podium in the front, so everybody could see from her shoes to her dress to her hair. She was immaculate, and I wanted to be like her. Henrietta, I was with her as chair throughout her 4 years, and of course I succeeded her as chair. One thing about Henrietta, she was not shy about her advocacy for CSK books. She played an instrumental role in bridging the gap between the Association of Library Service to Children and CSK. There was some animosity among the groups, and having Henrietta, who was held in high regard by all, brought the groups closer together.
Carolyn, your leadership indelibly helped to shape the character, the pride, the fabric of this award. I mean, as the CSK task force chair from 93 to 97, which included the 25th anniversary celebration. We'll never forget that. The launching of the CSK Book Award, Vision to Reality, the Genesis, the New Talent Steptoe Award. We're sure that you have a few stories.
I do have a few stories, but I can't remember most of them. But one of the most important things for me and that I'm most proud of is the relationship I established with authors and illustrators during this time. There's a picture of Walter Dean Myers and I'm presenting him with his award that particular year.
Ooh, you're so sharp.
There's a picture of Sharon, Draper, and I.
Oh, yeah.
Draper came to visit a school under my nonprofit umbrella. And there's a picture of Patricia McKissick and I.
Oh, yeah.
Very close to Patricia and Fred McKissick that I saw for many years doing ALA.
We wanted to know about the most challenging issue of your tenure as chair of the CSK task force.
You guys might not know it, but my most challenging time as chair of the CSK Book Awards was when the OLOS office was without a director.
I can believe it.
The fall of 1996 to the spring of 1997, I had to do everything by myself, including communicating with the publishers and the authors about their role at the breakfast. And both of you have been chair. You know what I went through. Satia came on in the spring of 1997. And Satia had these great ideas. Satia was very important in elevating the Coretta Scott King Award. Satia came in, she took the Coretta Scott King Awards under her arms, she nourished it, and she's responsible for the money that we get from the seal. The vendor we had for the seal was very expensive. It was very expensive to reproduce the seal. And Satia said, we can do better than that. She found another vendor who produced the seal cheaper, and therefore the seals became one of Coretta Scott King Book Award #1 income.
And to this very day.
Yes, and to this very day.
Carolyn, as a task force chair during the historic 25th anniversary and the marketing chair during the 50th anniversary, tell us, what were some of the things that were done to make those two events so special? And what motivated you to dedicate so many years of your professional life to this award?
Okay, the 25th anniversary, the planning committee was the Atlanta group. And Miss Yates was alive, and she would come to the meetings. We had most of our meetings at David Searcy's house because he was the best cook in the world. For the 25th anniversary, we had a gala reception where over 17 of our authors and illustrators came.
Oh, yeah.
This is a picture of the attendees sitting around waiting to get their books autographed.
So, yeah,
that's Floyd Cooper.
Floyd Cooper and Ashley Bryant.
Yes, autographing books. This is Mrs. Yates, me, and Wade Hudson of Just Us Books. And I want you to pay close attention to the medallion Mrs. Yates has around her neck, because I have a story to tell you about that. Story is, I gave out those medallions to the publishers, to the authors, to some of everybody, and at the reception that evening. When I got to my hotel that night, I got a telephone call. It was from Patricia McKissick. She said, Carolyn, you gave those medallions out to every Tom, Dick, and Harry, but you didn't give one to Basil Phillips. So she said, you need to make up for it.
Carolyn, tell our audience who Basil was, because we know him.
Yes. I have to tell you about Basil. Basil Phillips encouraged John Johnson to be a sponsor of the Coretta Scott King Award. John Johnson, the Johnson Publishing Company, was a sponsor until 2011.
Wow.
They actually gave the honorarium. And when we increased the honorarium, I called Basil and I said, we are increasing. What is Johnson Publishing Company going to do? He said, we're going to go along with everybody else. Basil would go in Johnson's office and say, you know, it's time for you to write that check for the Coretta Scott King Book Award Commission. That Sunday morning at the breakfast, I called up Basil Phillips and I put that medallion around his neck. All right, all right.
But you know, that's interesting that Patricia McKissick was close enough to you to tell you about that mistake, because when you were in the position that you were, it was just, you just forgot it. I mean,
I did. And of course, I wasn't there in the beginning, so his name wasn't resonating.
That was so lovely of her to do it.
The 50th anniversary was so special, and we tried to pull out all the stops. The gala at the Library of Congress was so special, with over 30 of our CSK winning authors and illustrators present, and being hosted by the first African-American Librarian of Congress was historical. As far as passion for the Coretta Scott King Award and why I stayed so involved in it, I'd like to read a quote from George Washington Carver. And he says, no individual has any right to come into the world and go out without leaving behind his or her distinct and legitimate reason for having passed through. So I guess the Coretta Scott King was my one of mine, distinct and legitimate reasons for passing through. I also like to say that I continued to promote African-American books for children in my retirement. This is the launch of my Aunt Liv's Reading Room. It's named in honor of my mother because she was a staunch supporter of mine. This is the book display I had at the launch and of the Aunt Liv's Reading Room. Also, this is Sharon Draper at one of the schools, the Aunt Liv's Reading Room, along with her agent and several other African-American groups in Atlanta. We had Sharon Draper in Atlanta for a week. I also won the Zora Neale Hurston Award, and this is Virginia Stanley presenting me with the award. And this is a copy of the award. And this was for my work with Aunt Liv's Reading Room.
So tell us a little bit about how you think the Coretta Scott King Award affected African-American children's literature in general.
The very existence of Coretta Scott King Award brought recognition and opportunities to be published for African-American authors that would never have been recognized before.
I think you're right.
The Coretta Scott King Book Award provided diversity in the children's literature genre, and it provided people that are revered: Walter Dean Myers, Virginia Hamilton, Jerry Pinkney. If you think about it, what would children's literature be without them?
That's right. They opened the doors. They were trailblazers.
Okay.
Yes.
Carolyn, what kind of advice would you give to newer members of the CSK committee?
Well, what I'd like to say to newer members, it seems like everybody wants to join the CSK Book Award Committee to be on the jury. The jury is an important part of what we do because they select the books for us. The critical work of CSK is done by the committee.
That's right.
We have standing committees that make up the executive board. If you're going to come on board, come to stay, come to chair a standing committee, come to be a part of a standing committee.
Well, tell us, how has being involved with ALA and the Coretta Scott King Award enhanced your career and your personal life?
Well, I had been involved in ALA since the mid-'80s. When I initially came to ALA, I was involved in YAZA and PLA, and I served on the Search Action Committee and the ALA Council. And here's a picture of me at the exiting the ALA Council. It enhanced my career because most of the time, if I was in a leadership role in ALA, I got my way paid to the conference. It enhanced my personal life because it gave my sons, as well as the children of Atlanta, numerous opportunities to meet African American authors and illustrators. It helped my sons understand why I was locking myself in a room from September to December to read books.
Carolyn, during your work with CSK, you have also been very active with the Black Caucus. Share with us how you integrated those two arenas.
I think Coretta Scott King and Black Caucus are kindred spirits. We have our mission is similar, promoting African American literature and providing staff development opportunities for African American librarians. This is the cover of the Black Caucus newsletter where Dorothy Godfrey and I chaired the 10th National Conference of African American Librarians. Whenever I was involved with the National Conference of African American Librarians, I always had a CSK component. So here's a picture of the pre-conference we had in Atlanta. And these are the authors that were there. Jason Reynolds was also there, but he had to go for an interview. So he left before the picture taking.
Oh, wow.
That's wonderful. Well, Carolyn, do you have any parting thoughts, anything you want to share with us, you know, and particularly with America?
Yeah.
About
you know
the
what? I challenge people to find their passion, a cause much bigger than themselves. And when you do this, you're going to run into some challenges along the way.
Yeah.
But you have to be steadfast. And you might, as my congressman, the late John Lewis, said, you might have to get in some good necessary trouble.
He did say that.
If you do that, you'll leave a legacy just like he did.
That's right.
Oh, Carolyn, we love you, girl.
No, we do. Applaud, applaud.
It's been wonderful, ladies. It's been wonderful.
I want to give a shout out to the Archives and History Committee members with whom it has been my pleasure to work. They bring the diversity of school, public, and university perspectives to the work of our committee. Krista Cargita, Sam Bloom, Rita Aubach, Doris Gebel, and Monica Chapman, our ALA staff liaison.